think we see from the story that no matter what in our life, threats, storms come at any time and from various places. It's not scripted. It breaks on you when you least expect it, but you know it's building, but it's coming. This is what it says about Hezekiah. This is what it says about his life. It says that after all that Hezekiah had so faithfully done, this guy was living faithful. When he first took over his role as the kingdom, he got together with Isaiah and the men of God, and they finally went into the temple, which was not even being used anymore. And they spent days taking out all the idols and all the incense that was dedicated to other gods. And they cleaned it all up and they sanctified it, and then pretty soon they began to have worship there again. And they went in and took all the sacred stones and all the things that were in high places. So Hezekiah was walking faithful, but yet a storm was brewing for him that was going to engulf his whole nation. The next king, after the guy we read about, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah, and he laid siege to their fortified cities. So even he was walking faithfully, even though he's leading his people in the ways of God, a storm, this plight, this thing that's going to encompass everything, is going to define who they are, overtakes them. And that's just for us to all understand that no matter how faithful we are, it doesn't inoculate us. There's no immunization to the things that will attack and threaten us. They are going to come. And what do we do? What are the principles we can draw from them? I think, first of all, when these storms come, when the challenge, whatever it happens to be, if it's joblessness, if it's families that are breaking apart, if it's health, it's that they're very real. It's not just something, oh yeah, I'm concerned, or it's not really that big of a problem. It's huge. It's there. There's nothing else there. In fact, it becomes so real that it begins to impact those around us. It's not just something like, well, it's a danger, but I'm going to go back and watch my DirecTV. It's no big deal. Everything's going to go back to normal. It doesn't work that way. It's something that there's nothing else you can do but face it. And so in 2 Chronicles, this is kind of the story that was unfolding when this king laid siege to these cities. Is that some of the officers and the people began to talk to Hezekiah and to those around him saying, hey, what are you guys doing? Give it up. Just throw in your towel. Let this happen. Just let us come and invade you. So Sennacherib's officers spoke further against the Lord God and against his servant Hezekiah. The king also wrote letters insulting the Lord, the God of Israel, and saying this against him: just as the gods of the peoples of the other lands did not rescue their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not rescue his people from my hand. Then they called out in Hebrew. Now when they were talking there, Zechariah's people, they were talking to Hezekiah's representatives, and they were talking Aramaic. And the guy said, don't talk in Hebrew, because the guys on the wall will hear you and they'll lose heart. What you're saying is going to just pull their heart down, and they're going to be depressed. And they're going to think, man, there's no way out of this. But they continue to talk anyway. And they called to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall to terrify them and to make them afraid in order to capture the city. They spoke out about God, the God of Jerusalem, as they did about the gods of other peoples of the world, the work of man's hands. And so the people who were trying to be faithful, trying to hang on, seeing that the laying siege was happening around them, here they come and mocking them and saying, you got to give up, and trying to find the strength to stand, hope that you're going to get through this. That was the challenge. And so, first, I think the story tells us is that these threats, all threats, they pose a problem to our faith, not just to our situation, not just to our bank account, not just to our health. They pose a challenge to our faith, because what do? They attack your God. You're living this way because you trust in God. And this thing, first it does, it kind of gets you at it. Where will you believe God in the storm, whatever is coming on you? Will you throw in the towel like the guys on the wall who are losing their heart? Or will you find that place to stay faithful to God? So real threats, and they are real. God works in the real world. He's a real God. He doesn't kind of, he understands that when we go through that, we really do feel the full brunt of the emotions and the challenges and the chaos. but it requires real faith to go through it. So you see this coming, I think, and as Hezekiah saw it coming, one of the real threats, real faith. That's the challenge when you see the storm clouds kind of gathering and just see ready to break on you, is that God knows it's real. In fact, not only does the book of Hezekiah, the book of Isaiah paint this picture of the people feeling it, it also shows us the second half. What is God's response to this? God's allowing it to happen. And we know the prophet's been telling about judgment coming, about God going to use whatever he can to bring the people back to himself, because he's made a special commitment, a forever eternal commitment to them. They will be his people. And we see that also in the kingdom, that the nation of Israel will be God's people. So first of all, God is not surprised. This whole situation is befalling Hezekiah and Isaiah. This is what God says. And again, we're in Isaiah chapter 37. But I know, speaking to Sennacherib, speaking to the threats that are coming, is, but I know where you stay, and when you come and go, and how you rage against me. Because you rage against me, because your insolence has reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose, and my bit in your mouth, and I will make you return by the way you came. God is not surprised when these things happen to our lives. God is not surprised when things challenge us. Right? He knows the extent of it. He even knows where it's coming from. So that's what the cool thing is about. We can take a look at it. We can be all kind of absorbed in it, and it does. It grabs everything about us. But at the same time, in faith, we need to realize what are the truths of this. And one of them is that God knows who and what threatens us. God knows it. And God speaks directly to it. Second thing I think what's interesting about here is that when we're threatened, God takes it personally and God takes it seriously. Because we're still his people. This thing is still hitting us, but when it threatens us, God knows it and God understands it. A little bit in the same chapter says, who is it you have insulted? Again, it's God talking to Sennacherib and blasphemy. Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel. So it's not just Jerusalem that's being besieged and the people are being threatened. God says, hey, I have a stake here. I have a stake in my people. And I know. And I'm going to deal with it. I take it personally when my people are hurt. And I'll be there. And we kind of one of the bigger questions we have when you deal with evil and with things that don't seem to be right, horrific, whatever it happens to be, is how does God work that out in his plans? And that's a challenge, especially when we kind of think of rationally, we think of it, in an apologetic way, that this is a good God. In Proverbs chapter 16:14, it says that God works out everything for his own ends. Even evil, he's not surprised by it. He knows this is happening. He allows it to happen. And sometimes it's a lot bigger than we can understand. We can't put it in a nice little box. Right? We can't put it in a little notebook with bullet points explaining it all. It's a challenge. But God is working.